and we'll go ahead and start with the 3 C's. Now, I hate the word change because change is, for me, I'm a change junkie. It should actually say the 4 C's because change is on the horizon. If you haven't received the memo, we've got compensation. We're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about choice and how you can choose the path and how you negotiate. We're also going to talk about competition and how we as Best Choice Realty frame the conversation and our contracts. Gosh, maybe it should be 5 C's. Contracts is also another thing we changed. So we have new forms in Washington, if you haven't heard. All of you have maybe taken the NWMLS training. They gave you more of a high level on the why. I want to give you a little bit more tonight about some of the tangibles that we actually have available for you to use. But the most important thing is that one thing that hasn't changed, commission obviously changed. We're kind of going away. That's kind of a naughty word right now. We want to talk about compensation rather than commission. So get in that. That's taken, I've said commission like 10 million times today. And I've got to refrain from doing that. All of the forms, the listing agreement, the purchase and sale agreement, even the commission disbursement forms have changed now, and they're compensation forms. So all new terminology, you'll see that referenced in many of the things going forward. The reason they're changing compensation, one thing that has not changed with compensation is that the firms still are responsible to handle all incoming and outgoing compensation that you earn as a real estate broker. So a lot of the reasons they're doing these changes at NWMLS was because of that very, very strong, important point that we handle compensation in the firm. And we also have to handle your taxes for the Washington state. And so we need to make sure we appropriate taxes accordingly. The forms that we definitely took a look at when actually at the start of the summer, they let us know about this as designated brokers. And what we decided to do as an office is get ahead of it. And we went ahead and created, because we knew we were going to be in multiple MLSs, not just in the NWMLS, we decided to go ahead and create our own listing agreement, which we will show you tonight. And we also had our attorney in-house amend our buyer agency agreement. Our buyer agency agreement was fantastic. In fact, our attorney made very small amount of changes. He was very impressed with the progressive nature that we had back in 2019 when we actually designed our buyer agency agreement. So you won't see many revisions, and you'll see the necessity to use the buyer agency agreement because of the way that the compensation is negotiated. The most important form, if you want to jot it down and you want to look at that form specifically tonight, would be the 41C. That would be the form that I would spend the time with. If you have not used a 41C in the past, that one is really what we built our listing agreement and our buyer agency agreement around. And you'll see it's referenced in the purchase and sale agreement. So let's go ahead and go on in, Shannon, and show everybody where they can go to get these said forms. Certainly they're available in Transaction Desk. I don't want you guys using the 1A that the MLS put together, because we are in multiple areas of operation across the state. We will be using our own 1A. So we've called it BCR 1A. If you go to our homepage on bestchoicerealtyhomes.com, Shannon's there right now, and you go into our member resource, you will see that our form is there, and you can download and print them right from the resource website. If you don't know how to access the resource website, you can simply just send an email to support@bestchoicerealtywa.com. If you don't have a login and password, many of you may have not checked our website out recently. If you need access to this tonight or tomorrow, just send an email to support and we'll be happy to give you the invitation code to access the member-only resources. But this is the sample listing agreement. You can notice that the font and the size looks really good. The Northwest MLS form is only 3 pages. Ours is 6. And the reason for that is we want you to be able to use these. No, we now have to use so many amendments and addenda. We kept everything in one document. You'll notice that we have a place where you will have to drag and drop some information, but it looks very similar to the listing agreement that you can get from the Northwest MLS, at least from the first page. Compensation is the reason they made this change. So it does not say commission. And it does have a place where you fill in the percentage or the dollar amount. It also has a section for unrepresented buyers. So you need to have that discussion with your seller on how you're going to handle that, as well as how much are you willing to pay the buyer brokerage firm. And there is a percentage for that. The reason it says buyer brokerage listing firm is because I don't want you to have to use separate addenda. This is just the only thing you have to worry about is learning how to use our listing agreement and then the 41C. We're not having to train on multiple numbers. I think you'll appreciate that I've taken the time to work with our attorney to make it simpler on you. There is a section on page 1 that talks about dual agency. At our firm, we do allow for dual agency, and you do have to have a statement. You have to have this filled in as well when you're talking about dual agency. I think we've covered that, and it also is covered in the new agreement as well. Go to the next page. And I'm not going into the specific scenarios. If you want to sign up for the classes, we are going to have classes throughout the month of October and some videos that I record to kind of go over some scenarios. Really just want to just roll out the form and show you that it is 6 pages. And there's a reason for that because we are in multiple MLSs. So we authorize the seller to put it on multiple MLSs. As you start to see the expansion into Spokane, we have an overlap there and you will get some extra you can have some extra exposure into some other marketplaces as well as we grow. Included items number 7, this was taken, this is not in the Northwest MLS. We purposely included term 7 because we wanted to make it easy for you so you could just data entry into the Northwest MLS and just make sure that your client's aware that they have to keep those items pertinent into their listing. But if they might want to include, say, the refrigerator and the washer and dryer, they're going to want to make sure you type that in or you write that in on term 7 if you're not using input sheets. Number 8, acceptable terms also need to be filled in if you're using acceptable terms of sale. Some of these provisions were in some of the listing agreements across the state, and we included them here to make it easy for all Best Choice Realty agents to use our forms and not have to have 2 different listing agreements. Poor people from other MLSs were having to use several different listing agreements. So we wanted to keep it all in one. So it is 6 pages, so you have to use a little bit more ink. But if you notice, you go on down to page 5 and 6, Shanna, if you want to scroll on down. Yeah, we, instead of using form 7, you know, Northwest MLS, we put it on term 7. So that was nice. So we've included that to make it really easy for the clients to decide how they want to expose their home to the general public. Also, wire transfer. We know you guys aren't getting the wire transfer warning. We want to make sure we have proper disclosure there. And also disclosing that we have contractors and things like that that we are using. So on the last page, number 19, talks about contractors and vendors and people that we engage by the seller. So we wanted to make sure that we have proper disclosure in the state of Washington and that the listing firm is not a contractor as defined under the state of Washington. We have this type of language that's been drafted by our attorney. Some of you that have contractor licenses or are concerned because you have your own businesses, this was something that oftentimes you were using or sometimes you forgot to include because it's another, you know, another number or another addendum. We just went ahead and included it all in your listing agreement. We recognize that you as a broker spend a lot of money in preparing that listing, such as staging, photography, drone, all kinds of things that you do to prepare and list the property. And we want to make sure that there's compensation tied to that and that there is reimbursements that is defined. Nor warranties or representations. Again, just keeping you out of harm's way was the idea behind including this in our listing agreements. And then payment obligation. Sellers responsible for contracts and vendors, and then they would give you the rights to go ahead and contract with some of these people. The seller would then sign, and then you signing on behalf of the listing firm would sign on the buy signature. You guys have all been given the authority to sign on behalf of Best Choice Realty with this particular form. Okay. The last page is don't forget to include the listing agreement, the legal description. You can get that legal description from your title and escrow company. You should have them initial that and incorporated with your 6 pages and sent to the firm so that we have a valid listing agreement that we actually could litigate if something happened. Okay, next slide, Shannon. If you go to the bloopers, some of you have already asked me some questions today. We actually, just because they made changes doesn't mean that we are not competing right now for business. This is fresh off the press. We actually have a listing. This is in Lakewood, so good job. Corey Lewis, it's his first listing with Best Choice. Welcome and congrats. He already found a little kind of sneaky thing that I'm hoping you guys won't make the mistake. You have to end up putting a tail provision and then also compensation. Our tail provision, we kept it simple across the board so you don't have to think. The tail provision for Best Choice Realty will always be 180 days unless you get some sort of an amendment to that. And the compensation allows for you to negotiate that, but that's compensation for the buyer agent. You notice that he has 2.5%. It's because you have to fill in the box correctly. So it's a little clerical. Both Candace and I, actually Candace was the one that figured it out. I was like having a brain fog, but you have to put it in the right box when you input the listing on the Northwest MLS, and that will make that extra percentage go away. So that's how you fix that. So we've already had people ask about that. The other question or blooper that we have, this is a snippet from a screenshot that somebody sent me this morning. Said, I'm writing up an offer. Did I do it right? And I would look at the compensation here. This is from page 1 of the purchase and sale. And it's got a dollar sign or a percentage. You want to select one or the other. So you want to select percentage because she ended up putting 2.5 and pay as offered. Pay as offered means that she has made a copy of that listing agreement or that screenshot from right up above and can confirm that that's what was offered, 2.5. So if you see that it's 2.5 pay as offered, that's what would go on your first page of the purchase and sale. Just the one thing you need to always make sure you do is we don't want 2.5. I think that would be $2.50. So we definitely want 2.5% on that first box that you need to do on the drop down. If you end up going with the other box, that's when we have to negotiate our buyer agent agreement commission. That would be other, which would be 41C, or using our buyer agency agreement to negotiate our compensation. See, I've already made the C. See, I said commission. I should have to pay money, I think, if I say the wrong thing. But yes, double check and make sure you've got that correct on your compensation on page 1 of your purchase and sale. That is the biggest change that was made. And that's what's got everybody joining these webinars and these trainings. It's really not a big deal. It's very simple. You just need to look at your 41C if you're having to check the other box and negotiate your compensation. Okay. I told you guys we would cover a lot today. I'm already 15 minutes in, and I covered at least the 41A, the BCR 1A, and we alluded to the 41A and the 41C. You can get the buyer agency agreements on the resource website. So let's go back to there, Shannon. There we go. Buyer agency agreements right there. You'll notice it's very similar. In fact, almost identical. There's just one more section. I'll go ahead and show them. Yep, perfect. It looks identical as far as the terminology. It allows you to put other provisions if you're offering some sort of credit or you're doing some other additional work for the client. The only change that our attorney made to the 41A that we had internally is the section where it talks about compensation. If you go back to number 3, Shannon, you're being very good, my Vanna over there on Zoom. 3A has 3A, 3B, and 3C. Before it only had 2 options, a retainer fee or a fee that is negotiated right here on 3C. This has it automatically filled in at 3%. So if you are needing to negotiate with your potential buyer, you can almost negotiate with them like, oh, I want you to do me a discount. You could certainly put a 2.5 in there or a 2%, but just realize that's what that's how we would run it. The consultation fee is separate from that. Some of you are just basically consulting with people and actually getting money from that, which has to be collected and sent to the firm. And sometimes that would be what you want to do. Different circumstances will be created different ways. Maybe you're representing maybe a family member and there's a consultation fee that's associated with doing that. That might be 3B. That might not be 3C. So there's some certain circumstances where we may use that, and we'll go over that in later trainings. Okay, but it's a 180-day tail clause on that one as well. So we've used the tail clause 180 days on the buyer broker agreement, the buyer agency agreement, and 180 days on the listing agreement as well. So I think you guys will be, let's just keep it simple and keep those tail clauses intact. Okay, go back, Shannon, if you could, back to the resource website. Oh, sorry. And I want to show you, we might as well, right? We went ahead and we cleaned up all of the other Best Choice Realty forms or additional clauses. You'll see all of them have been updated. I'm not going to go into them, but seller procured inspection report, it's been updated. Same thing with the additional clauses. All of them have we've taken the time to clean them all up as well and reloaded them on Transaction Desk and on the resource website here. Okay. Let's go back to the presentation. Thank you. So really at this point, now that you know that the change is on the horizon and the cat is out of the bag, there's another C word, it's time to go all out. And it's time not to just put the pedal to the metal and realize that you have a huge advantage being at Best Choice Realty. We've already taken a very proactive approach. We've got your car all ready to go. All you need to do is understand, is it a buyer's marketplace? Is it a seller's marketplace? Or is it a balanced marketplace? And it really depends what area you're working of the state of Washington. Sellers, you got to realize though, that sellers are still thinking in their minds, there's no place to go. There's not enough homes in the market. And I can say that many of them have taken a reset and said, oh, I'm not going to go anywhere, where they need to almost be consulted by you saying, I'm seeing more properties come on the market. And there is. The data does speak to that across the entire state of Washington. I'm going to go over a few numbers you might want to highlight for them, because sellers still think there's no place to go, but we can prove with the data there is plenty of places that they can go, and there are deals to be had. Right now, it's a great time to get into the marketplace for sellers, or for sellers that may want to include a home sale contingency. We have seen the rise in the last 3-4 months of home sale contingencies. There is also a perception by buyers that and from sellers that there's downward pressure on pricing. Also, you need to be able to provide information and data to counteract that type of thought process. There may be some downward pressure in some certain areas, or some listing agents that have done a very poor job in pricing their properties. But if you look at the overall days on market, we're not seeing days on market going crazy, and we certainly are not seeing price reductions that are substantial beyond what the market is typically bearing. And then the buyers also have in their minds, and again, these are 3 bullet points I wanted to discuss with you guys, that it's not affordable. And while you just need to think creatively and you need to get with your lender, there is affordability challenges out there, certainly with the interest rates going up. But if you work with your lender and you really strategically look at what they can do for your buyers, it can be affordable. They may need to save money. They may need to actually, wait a little bit before they actually buy. But it's more of a perception than the reality if you're working with somebody that has dual income, or they have means to be able to have somebody help them get into the house. And there's more education that's needed about affordability more than ever. So we are seeing a rise of millennials jumping into buyer education classes, and actually agents that are millennials that are actually picking up these buyers, and they're actually taking them out and looking at homes. And you're just like, whoa, I thought that they thought it was not affordable. It's just because they didn't understand how lending works, and they need to be guided and directed with a consultant to help them understand the process. So plenty of things that you guys need to spend some time learning how to deal with. Those are 3 objections or 4 objections that you really need to kind of think about on how you look at it in your respective area of the state, as well as how you look at the information. So I just did a quick exercise just to kind of drive my point home as far as the marketplace. I looked at Pierce County, King County, Snohomish County, Clallam County, Clark County, which is a completely different MLS, Kitsap County, and San Juan County. All of the price, so I can see why people are thinking affordability. Median price point starts at like $550, no, $481 in Clallam, and $456 in Spokane. So that's kind of your median sales price. So I can see why first-time home buyers are like going, oh my gosh, is it affordable? I mean, prices have gone up, but so has inflation, and there's just, you have to know how to strategically look at your investments, and it's a longer investment rather than a shorter investment. But just so you get an idea of, is it a buyer's market or is it a seller's market or is it a balanced market? All of the Pierce, King, and Snohomish, all still under 2 months of supply. 1.71 Pierce, 1.66 in King, Snohomish 1.73. Still a seller's market in King, Pierce, and Snohomish. Now, Clallam and Clark are kind of starting to transition more into a balanced marketplace for residential. Clallam is at 2.65 of months of inventory. Clark is at 2.3. And then San Juan County, which is out there in the San Juans, we don't do a lot of business in the San Juans. It'd be nice to. They are more in a buyer's market. I'm sorry, kind of transitioning out of a balanced into a seller's market. They're at 5.77 months of inventory on San Juan. So some of the areas, but Spokane still at 1.54, still a seller's market in Spokane County. Days on market has all gone up. If you want to go to the next slide, Shannon. I just wanted to show you kind of to bring my point home. This is right from the Northwest MLS. You guys have access to all of this data if you're members of the Northwest MLS. This is the entire Northwest MLS, the data here. As you can see, the percent of change is down for new listings, pending sales, and closed sales for the month of August, all down anywhere from 10 to almost 30% of the sales volume down. That's why you're seeing some of your friends and other companies losing their jobs, why the layoffs are happening, because the metrics right here are showing that there's less amount of transactions being done by the general population. But notice the days on market, it only went up from 14 days to 22 days. It is increasing, but that's still well within the means. It's still a very busy marketplace. You also look at the months of supply. It shows right there, it's averaging across the entire NWMLS 1.9, median sales price still right there, hovering in that area. So with that, San Juan County is the only county. Skagit County also is more of a seller's market. Ferry County, which you guys probably don't even know where Ferry County is. If there is any shout outs, good for you. Ferry County is out there. And Pacific County, they all decreased. In the days on market has gone really, really high, and it's definitely more of a seller's market. I'm sorry, a buyer's market in those counties, not a seller's market. But everybody should feel very confident knowing that, hey, we're going into the fourth quarter and there is less transactions. So that means you have to prospect a lot harder. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to give you some tips. I'm just going to go through them really quickly. Things I would keep in mind if I was say a buyer's agent or a listing agent working in the resale environment. The terms, if you're going to take a listing for resale, gone are the days where you only want to take a 1 month listing or a 2 month term on the listing. Give yourself some time so you can work and massage that listing, and you can maybe have to do a price reduction, or you may have to combat, some challenges along the way. Take the listing for 6 months. As a firm owner, I can tell you with some suggestions. But at the end of the day, it's whatever you want to negotiate with that seller. Take a 6 month listing on resales though. The reason for that is because in the next year, we're going to see across the nation, the national numbers, we're expecting there will be 1.7 million less homes that need to be sold. So that means there will be less transactions being done. I think that's going to prove out next year. And the interest rates are going to go up to 8. So that's going to also provide some challenges. Do we do a price reduction? Or maybe do we buy down the interest rates? Or maybe, like I talked to a couple agents today, maybe we're doing some sort of creative seller finance where we're actually helping with that financing positioning. That's going to take some time and definitely some legal maneuvering so that you can write those contracts in such a way that it makes sense for buyer and seller. New construction. We already are seeing new construction in the last 2-3 weeks. It's like overnight it happened. Inventory of new construction across the nation went up to an 8th month supply, and it definitely is a buyer's market. There are still some pockets of our area where new construction, there's still waiting lists, but for the most part, builders are looking to cooperate and work with buyers agents again so that their inventory is moved and they can have creative options. We're already talking about that with many of the builders that we have relationships with. But if you are working with a builder and you're doing a new construction listing, make sure you take a year listing. It's a longer go. because there is more competition. We have a special listing agreement that we have designed. So it's something separate from the 1A, the BCR 1A, that you can take if, say, you have a developer that you're wanting to get all of those listings in that neighborhood. Talk to me separately. We have a special listing agreement that we've designed for those very purposes. So don't say no to that. There's some great opportunities for some of your colleagues that can maybe even sit site or can assist you with those projects as we go forward. But we have spent the time to create that listing agreement for that project as well. Condominiums, term should be 9 months for that if you're taking a condominium listing. Now, some condos are actually still selling very quickly, but I would anticipate with less sales, you might want to have discussion with the lenders, especially because we're seeing reserve accounts that are having to be adjusted. Homeowners association rates are increasing. And so you want to make sure that you get your hands on those as soon as you possibly can. If you're the listing agent, if you're representing the buyer, be sure you're reviewing those resale certificates with your buyer so that you can exit the contract if they're not suitable for your buyer for the long term. Shannon, thank you for keeping me moving. I have a timeline I'm under tonight, so I want to make sure we get through everything. Commercial and multifamily, the term here has always been about a year listing for multifamily and commercial, because we want to make sure we collect all of that information and we have enough time to really find a suitable buyer. Sometimes there's some tenancy situations we have to deal with. You really want to consider partnering with another experienced Best Choice Realty broker. If you're dealing with commercial, we have a phenomenal amount of commercial brokers that are very good. In fact, some of them only do commercial. I don't know if you knew that. So if you are needing some support or help, let me know or let Candace know, and we would be happy to partner you with some of those experienced brokers to take on some of those larger projects. And kudos to many of you who have taken your first commercial project in the last 12 months and seen it to completion. There's been some fantastic deals that we've been brokering, and some of that does not get reported on the Northwest MLS where it should be, because we're doing really good stuff when it comes to our commercial deals. Let's go to the next slide. Land. Suggested term for land should be 1 year. We are still seeing land. It's funny because one of our employees, she actually got a phone call about some land, and she took the phone call, and it's just like one of those deal makers. They're wanting to like call because they think they can get a deal. Did you know that the marketplace is crazy? Well, it's Washington, and you need to be able to take a listing for a long time because land does take longer to sell. There's a lot more to it. There's feasibility studies and things that need to be done, plats that need to be approved, things like that. Also more creativity with financing on how to make those, how to turn that land into actual buildings and product. So take a longer listing. It will take longer to get some of the land moved as we start to go into a different marketplace. Let's go to the next slide. So overall, just the overall forecast that I'm forecasting, that others have forecasted across the nation, the affordability is still going to be a factor, but that has not been considered since 1996. So, you know, that's something we're going to still have to get around and have to, you know, really kind of challenge our thought process and be more strategic at how we think about it. And the high prices combined with interest rates, it's going to cause many home buyers to kind of just, and sellers to kind of just put the brakes on. We've seen it over the last month. You've got to get ahead of it. You have to be that positive person that says, hey, I bought when the interest rates were at 6.5. I remember, in fact, it wasn't 1996 where I bought. It was 2004 where I had an interest rate, I think it was 6.5% that I locked in on. But that house propelled me into buying another house that allowed me to buy an investment property. So, you know, you need to share the investment strategy of buying and selling real estate in the state of Washington and share the vision and allow that kind of freeze to thaw, because it will with the right information. But it will impact our number of sales that will occur nationally. So that's not going to change. In fact, it's going to get harder. Some of you have already contemplated, like, maybe I should retire. Don't retire. There's still a lot of opportunity out there. Candace is going to share some ideas with you. And don't freak out, because we've thought through a lot of this stuff, and none of the stuff has really changed in a way that you can't overcome. It's just how you converse with them about your compensation. and what you do to earn your compensation. And that just needs to be more transparent. Expectations of predictions, I would expect a flat appreciation in 2023. Even markets that have been really kind of like crazy marketplaces like Idaho, the reason why we went over to Idaho, they will start to see slowdowns. In fact, they've started to see some adjustment already, but we're predicting across the nation a 2.4% reduction in home prices. I don't think in areas of Washington we're going to see a ton of reduction, but we could. But we will see a slowdown in the amount of sales, and we already have started to see that. There are still many pockets in our area that are still seeing no price reductions. In fact, most of the areas we service are not seeing significant price reductions. If anything, the price reductions are being done because the seller had unrealistic expectations, and there had to be some education around comparable sales. And those reductions are done because of that, not because we're seeing the slowdown. It has nothing to do with that because it doesn't prove out. Once we get down to the price point where it needs to sell, we're seeing multiple offers. I mean, my goodness. So you've got to price it right from the get-go and not have this pie in the sky kind of attitude when you're pricing. All right. Agent counts. So just so you kind of get a sense of what you're dealing with, all of the MLSs are at record highs, and they are anticipating retraction, basically people retiring or getting out of the business. Low producing agents are going to continue to dabble though in the next year. And so don't give up. You're going to need to kind of combat that with your education and your experience, and obviously working at Best Choice where you have your own forms. Over the short term, they're going to kind of suck some units out of the marketplace, but you're going to hopefully help me attract the brokers that we want to be at Best Choice, because you're going to keep more of the money and cut a lot of that expense out of your business. So competitors are going to lay people off, and we're going to actually add more agents to Best Choice Realty in the various areas that we operate. But just so you can get a sense, 38,000 people are part of the Northwest MLS. 15,340 are in the Clark County, or kind of crossing over into Portland. And then 5,000, give or take, are in Spokane. So that's a lot of real estate agents when you look at how many sales are being done in our respective areas. So, and you realize that there's going to be less amount of transactions. So, you know, as far as getting ahead of it, you want to kind of get to know your forms and get to know how to incorporate compensation into your conversation. And then you'll see more opportunity. Let's go to the next slide, Shan. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa and have her, she's been on a few more of these calls than I have. So I'd love to get her take. If Rachel and Lisa could unmute your line. You've got about 10 minutes if you guys want to take some time. I've got a couple slides that we've designed for Escrow, but would love to chat real quick with Lisa Schultz and with Rachel.
Hi, you guys. Chicago Title, super excited to be on the call with you guys. So I did a click through and saw so many of you. So there are a couple things that we want to make sure you guys are aware of with these new forms. And Deanne, maybe you can also help with the lender piece, because this also affects the lenders a lot sooner than what we were used to in the previous forms. So first of all, on the contract, on your 1A, Shannon, I don't know if you guys have that or not. And if you don't worry about it, because I can read it.
Go ahead and show it, Shannon, if you want.
I got you.
Yep.
She always has, or I guess I don't want the 1A. I want the 21. Do you have the 21 up?
You mean the 41?
21, purchase and sale.
Purchase and sale. Yep, we'll get that up. There we go.
Awesome. Look at number 16. And it has a buyer broker firm compensation. So depending on your escrow company, if nothing's put in there, your closer may think there's no compensation for the broker. So you've got to fill in that box. Is it going to be percentage, pay as offered, or other C addendum? So please make sure that you get that number 16 taken care of as quickly as possible for you. Now, with that said, what normally happens is when you guys go mutual, you've sent that to your escrow company. The same day, the lender is emailing us and asking us for fees based on this purchase and sale. Now, if we've got compensation through the buyer, or we've got a change of compensation, your lender absolutely has to compensate for that and put it on their loan disclosure and their closing disclosure. So what we're asking for in the escrow industry is please make sure that your compensation forms are filled out, and please put them at the beginning of mutual acceptance. Shannon caught that the new compensation has the buyer sign off on your compensation. So as you're getting that done, the sooner escrow gets it, the sooner we can talk with the lender, and then they've got their loan disclosure. Now, we all understand commissions or compensation may change. And if they do, then give us a new form. At least we'll have a date trail for these forms. So what if you don't fill it in, or what if your compensation form has something different than the listing broker's compensation form? Paragraph U of that purchase and sale, Shannon, you don't have to show it. It's not going to
Yeah, actually go back to it, Shannon. Let's go look at the commission. I want to look at that and then also get ready to put up the form 40.
Okay, and it's
Yeah.
paragraph U, brokerage firm compensation. So I won't read it to you, but on line 209, it says if there's any inconsistency between the buyer broker's firm compensation offered in this listing and the listing agent's compensation, the listing shall supersede and control. And so what you guys are telling us is if we can't get this compensation figured out, we're going to go after what the listing says, which means you could lose some money. So make sure that your buyer's compensation is filled out completely and that discussion's been made. Now, let's take worst case scenario. Let's say the listing broker's compensation does not match what your buyer's broker's compensation says, and you have a disagreement. This is what could happen in escrow. Because we don't have a meeting of the minds, an escrow company could say, oh, geez, both brokers aren't agreeing. We're not going to close it until you agree to it. Well, Chicago Title's not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to continue to close the sale and hold back the compensation, and it will be a case by case, but for the most part, we want to get the sale closed and figure out this compensation for you, but we won't close the sale. But I do want to give you guys fair warning. Other escrow companies may see this as a not meeting of the minds and may not close the sale based on this compensation. That's why, once again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. By all means, please get those compensation forms into escrow as soon as possible. So if there's any discrepancy, we can get it worked out. Now, if you haven't given the lender the compensation, that could be a quick little issue because the loan disclosure and the closing disclosure may be wrong, which could cause a delay in closing. Okay. Rachel, do you want to? Oh, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Can I interject?
Yes,
Go ahead.
please.
Keep in mind, if it's not listed on the first page and we don't disclose it, then we can't charge it. So what happens if there's a mistake is that loan, it will just have to start completely over for us to be in compliance. Because we are not likely to pay, $50,000 because we were never told and we never disclosed. We would literally have to start the transaction from day one.
Okay.
So
That sounds like an extension to me, huh?
yeah, I mean, we could do it pretty quickly because we have all the material, but the lender's not likely just to say, oops, we're just going to change it because we're regulated and we'll have to pay post-closing that commission or the compensation.
So the sooner the better, right?
Yeah. And then one more point is that we need to know right away because we have to account it in the event that the buyer is paying the compensation. We have to make sure that we verify that money, that they have sufficient funds for it.
Yep. And then let's say the buyer is going to pay. And a question is, okay, how do I know that my buyer has the money to compensate me? And how do I know they won't spend it? How do I protect it? Well, what's nice about it, Chicago Title, we have already agreed that if the buyer wants to put in their broker's compensation and deposit it in escrow, we will be happy to hold that compensation, and it will not be at risk in the event there's a contract dispute between the seller. We may have to hold back the earnest money through the dispute, but we will not hold back the buyer's broker's compensation. We will deal with that. So a couple different nuances. My recommendation is, if you have any questions, contact your title company and escrow company and say, hey, how would you be handling this? And they should be able to have clear answers for you. Chicago, we tried to be very proactive on this, thought of all the different ways things could go sideways or have questions. And we want to make sure that we do it so it's nice and smooth for you. Rachel, do you have anything to add in?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. The first thing is line 16 on the purchase and sale agreement is where we're going to start by looking at. And even though the 41C will say what percentages the commissions are, we do still, the compensations are. We do still need the compensation disbursement form that kind of says where the funds are going and how you want the funds. So keep that in mind, that we still do need both.
And lastly, check your settlement statement and make sure your transaction coordinators, if you're using them, are up to speed with these new changes. Some of them don't realize that because they're not going into Northwest MLS and they're not a party to it. So if you're working with TCs, have appointments with them. And if they need to have appointments with escrow, by all means, have them give Rachel or myself a call, and we're happy to sit down with them and spend some time with them. And you as well, always.
Most of the transaction coordinators that I've spoken to, they're also in-house here at our firm. What they're doing to kind of work closely with your closer is they're actually sending the commission disbursement initially, and then they're sending commission disbursement. Look, see how compensation agreement, they're sending the compensation agreement out initially once you get mutual within that first 5 days, and then also sending a new one like before closing, just so that everybody is made aware. And that would also help alleviate some of the problems that could affect lending, because everybody's got to balance out. The CDs have got to be done correctly. So if there's a dispute, we want to get ahead of it. Shannon, if you could just real quick go to Form 40, and then I'll turn it over to Candace. There are 2 Form 40s. So don't be freaked out. They look very similar. This is the one where the buyer could be funded. Keep that on the screen. So in the case where Lisa's talking about, can Chicago Title hold the buyer agency, say that there's no commission, no compensation offer, there's 0 compensation. I hope that doesn't happen, but let's say that there is. And in fact, there has been some sales we've done with Chicago where that has been the case. In that case, they've actually supplied us with a form. In the past, what we would do in the last year when we worked with a few builders and a few other off-market opportunities, what we've ended up doing is sending Chicago Title or the respective title company, we've sent them over a copy of our buyer agency agreement, and that would be all that they need to withhold the money. But in this case, they've given us the 40A to use it, so you can fill that out and have the buyer sign it. Or it says buyer shall pay how much money of the buyer funded brokerage firm compensation. Boom, they can sign that, and then they could write out their check, and then it could be deposited right into Chicago Title or whatever title company, and that's part of the file. Or this is the Form 40 that's been revised, so it doesn't say commission disbursement form, it says compensation disbursement form on the top. And notice that the biggest change is just the bottom section, where it has if you represent the buyer, you fill out the top portion. If you represent the seller, you fill out the bottom section. If you represent both parties, the top is for representing the buyer, and the bottom is for when you represent the seller. It's actually easier. And the first time we looked at this morning, it almost looked harder, but it actually is easier, Candace, right? Yes. So that's,
well, I think too, there were 2 boxes here before, Rochelle, so you don't have to fill in as a listing agent the total commission. The buyer is having to supply their own compensation disbursement instructions.
and this is what we are having to get over to escrow. And then lenders would probably want to make sure if the buyer is bringing funds in for the compensation, probably want to get the 40A over to your lender, just so that they know it's coming. Right, Dan? You would be happy to
Yes.
see that.
That would be key.
Okay, perfect. All right, now we'll turn back to Candace for some great tips, some opportunities, some that you've seen, and some hot buttons we should consider.
Yeah, and so there's definitely, I think in every market with the changes that we're seeing, there's always opportunities. And so some of the opportunities and hot buttons, increase lead generation. What opportunities are presented to take advantage of now? And I think this says to get on the other side, start thinking outside of the box. We're going to be spending probably a little bit more time with our buyers, doing buyer's agency agreements and going through our process, the value that we add. Skill, compete aggressively for business. What are your weaknesses and how can we plan to improve? So scripting, call night, going over those things and just kind of being that, taking the extra step to be that agent that is providing value, right? So, and how do you do that? It's practice. Prospect really hard and be consistent. Now, more than ever, thinking about connecting with our lenders, going into your sphere, dive down in your sphere, as opposed to spending a bunch of money on the Zillow leads, dive into your database. How can you attack your database the best way possible and generate many leads from your database? And working together to leverage. It might be time to maybe spend some money on a mentor, right? As opposed to buying leads. Marketing. We need to do a little bit more marketing. We've got to get the word out. We need to get on social media and not be fearful of video. Video is big. How are you going to reach your future clients, right? Negotiation, we just talked about that. Don't be rusty, practice, script, come out to call night with us. We're doing call nights once a month from 4 to 6 p.m. I think every other Wednesday through the end of the year. If you choose not to prospect, you'll need to find agents to work alongside of you that can help. So that, we talk about leverage and best choice. There's so many different, there's opportunities here. We've got a ton of agents, just diverse group. And it's pretty amazing. So let's put our heads together and really think about those opportunities. Death, divorce, getting with your lenders and working closely with the lenders. Teach some classes. It doesn't have to be the 5-hour homebuyer classes. It can be a 1 hour, just explaining information, providing value, right, to our buyers and sellers. We've got contingent opportunity for contingent offers, as well as, death, divorce. Think outside of the box. Get with our title partners as well and have those conversations with them. What can I be doing? Because we're going to need to double down a little bit, but know that there is going to be some great opportunities in this market. I believe that 100%.
Let's go to a couple more. There's 2 more slides, Candace, and I think you can share that really cool success story we heard today.
Oh goodness. So I think he's on the call. He might not be, but anymore, but he's on the call. So open house. We have these wonderful open house kits. For $550, you get all of this, all of this. It's branded Best Choice Realty. You can have your open house signs, the personal A boards. It comes with a sign-in sheet and even door hangers. Those are things. So this weekend, it was planned out, but invitation to 2,000 people were invited to this open house. And would you believe today that open house had over 100 people through it? They did a barbecue. It was like a super grand open house. And it's resulted in a phone call today. I'm sitting here with 8 offers. What to do? So
yes.
Open houses, we got to do it right. It's not going to be, just put it out there, market it, send out the invitations, and they had a barbecue. So it was a grand open house barbecue. He had video of playing on the TV screens, big screens, showing the area, the parks, the schools, information. So it was big, all out, but wow. And his seller is probably knocked out for feet, 100,000 over asking price in the market where I mean, I'm not seeing a lot of people at my open houses, so I obviously need to do a better job and plan to do so. So open house kits for $5.50, that's a great deal. And everything is there for you.
And we'd ship it, all of this stuff includes shipping too. So you just get it shipped to your house. Shannon and I went ahead. It's time for us to kind of update our signage. Our A-frames were looking a little beat up. So we went ahead and updated ours. And having those personal directionals and having your name, your phone number. I know some of you have these, you collected a kit, but I love these. The guest survey pad was really cool. We used that this first time, then the first weekend. And then having those door hangers, those are great, where you can put your business card on them and just invite the neighbors, so they know that you're going to really get the word out about that open house. So great deal. Thank you so much, Candace, for that. I think there's one more slide. I think we've got just the next. Oh, that's right. The buyer packages.
And the new buyer's package. So this will have all the new forms that you need. And guys, consider having this. I mean, it's got a pen in it, a buyer's guide, the law of agency, all of your disclosure pamphlets, and it will also have the new forms that we'll be using the buyer agency agreement in there. $13. Come prepared and, show your client what you're going to do, for them, so that we don't have to worry about the fight of commissions. Yep, lead-based paint is in there, home warranty, mold and moisture, wire fraud, all of your disclosure receipts, and your agency agreement.
Okay, very good. Okay, go to the next slide. That will give you some contract changes. We are going to do a Monday night webinar. I'll probably go another couple weeks before I do another one, just to give you kind of like still the things I'm seeing. But I want to do in-person, scenario-based. So there are some sessions that you can come in and physically learn. We can go over some actual scenarios and practice how to talk about compensation. We have a session this Wednesday in Tacoma. And it's not in the Tacoma office. It is another location. So you'll want to get with me if you can make that session. Tukwila is this Friday. Linwood is next week, 12 to 2 in the Linwood office downstairs. And Spokane, Larry will do a special session for us in Spokane at that time. So those will be your in-person to really get your hands dirty. Let's practice writing them up. Let's talk about what are your challenges? What are you feeling like we need to get ahead of? But after those sessions, I think we'll get a good combination of what we want to do. And we'll do another Monday night just to kind of go over some of the objections or challenges and how we've overcome them. So we did record tonight's session. I think we did pretty good at staying to the schedule, Shannon. But I think there maybe was a few people that had some chats or comments. I'll go ahead and open the call up for just about 5 more minutes. If you have just a quick question or something we need to consider, please put something in the chat or unmute your line.
Yeah, and while she's pulling that up, I've got a couple that came through the chat already that I'll just pose. But if you've got, you wanting to run through a couple scenarios, that's why we have these in-person classes, so that you guys can run through that and feel prepared. So if you're wanting to repeat this, I know someone just messaged that in the chat. We'll have this recorded and posted tomorrow for if you're wanting to just, pause, play, whatever. But then we also have the in-person trainings as well that you can attend. One of the questions that we had, Rochelle, was about the tail clause. So what is a tail clause? If you don't mind just kind of expanding on that for those that had questions about what that is.
Of course, at the end of the day, Shannon, you're going to give me that one, but it basically protects your compensation if the seller decides to sell the home to somebody else. That you say you had a term, say it was a 6-month term on your listing agreement, that you had their home on the market, you paid for staging, you paid for photography, you got a ton of people through the open house. Maybe there was 100 people like the one we just had this last weekend. And then the seller decides not to accept any offers, that they didn't come in the way what they wanted. And then the listing continues. And then on the 4th month, they call you and say, hey, we want to cancel the listing, or they actually run the whole course of the listing. That tail clause protects your compensation after the term expires or cancels, that in case somebody came to their attention and they basically went around you to go ahead and do a deal, we would then go ahead and submit this to our attorney, and they would go after that compensation that was earned. So it's a way to protect. A tail clause is something that's tacked on. That's why it's called a tail. It's like tacked on the very end, that protects your compensation. And in summary, that's what it is.
Yep.
That answer the question, Shannon?
Yeah, no, that answers it. And I think we had someone who messaged me privately about the contractor section of the 1A. I think the intention is when we put together the 1A with our legal team, we really wanted and took a lot of mindful approach from what you guys are doing out in the field. And the addition, yes, it's a little bit longer, but there's a lot of things that are embedded in there that you don't have to use additional forms for, but then also the added protection for you. The reality of the situation is that listing agents are often employing other types of contractors, handyman, photographers, stagers, those types of things. And if the seller decided to default or cancel the contract early, is there some sort of recourse for you? Well, now there is. So if you're looking for protection in that regard, especially when you're taking on a higher end listing, this will be really helpful for you guys to have that conversation. One of the other questions that we had, Rochelle, was about consultations. So if you're working with a buyer, how is that consultation fee handled within the 41A? Is it applied towards commission? Is it not a compensation? See, I'm even catching myself too. Is that applied towards the compensation, or is
No,
it
it's
not, or is it
something
extra?
separate. Yeah, that's why we added it as a
Okay.
separate, because we were using the retainer in certain circumstances, and the retainer applies towards the compensation. The consultation fee does not. It's kind of like we're practicing law, but we're not really practicing law. We're just like, another layer, I guess, down on the ladder. But we do have that kind of agreement that's set up just like attorneys do when they're consulting with somebody. There is a consultation agreement that's embedded in our buyer agency agreement that I think would be really helpful. If you're sitting down and really having an all out conversation, and maybe, you educate and you get them to that point and they end up going somewhere else, at least there is some sort of compensation that you've earned. And I have a lot of respect for what you guys all do. Some people, they get into this business thinking it's super easy, and I've been doing this for almost 25 years now. And I can tell you, there's been days where I'm like, oh my gosh, we do a lot for our compensation. I've broken up bar fights. I've dealt with divorces. I mean, you name it, right, Candace? We've done all kinds of things.
Yeah.
I've got in the middle of some heated debates. I just found out one of my sellers passed away. There are 4 siblings trying to sell. I mean, there's so many life things that happen, and we take on so much. For us to be kind of challenged in this way, I had to really sleep on it long and hard. I could sit back and just do nothing and let the Northwest MLS give us our forms. I wanted to take a very proactive approach, and Shannon and I sat down with the attorney and hashed out, gosh, I think we went through about 8 different revisions to really keep in mind, so that it blended well with all of the MLSs that we service. And I think all in all, I'm very pleased with how it shook out. Sure, we might need to make some adjustments or tweaks, but for the most part, I'm very pleased with how it all shook out. Was there anything else, Shannon, on that question?
Yeah, I think this is just a side note. I know we've got a lot of real estate agents that are licensed with Best Choice that are investors or flippers themselves, or they're listing their own homes or their personal properties. So thank you for bringing it up, Diane. If you have a personal property that you are selling, yes, we still need a listing agreement. And especially even more so if there is another person on the listing along with you, husband, wife, spouse, that sort of thing. So keep that in mind. We still need a listing agreement, even if it is your personal residence, just so we understand how compensation is handled. Oftentimes, if you're using your commission is what it used to be used towards closing costs or what have you, just call our office and we can give you what the base fees are for those closings, and we can make sure that you can fill in the exact amount there.
Yep. Anything that's kind of like a one-off. Shannon and
Yeah.
do a great job of going over and helping you know how to fill out the compensation agreement, the 40 and the 40A. If you have any kind of unique situations, that's what we're here for, is to help you make that easy and get the lender and get the escrow company what they need. So great.
Yeah, we thrive on the weird stuff, right?
Yes, I know you guys do.
Yeah.
Got a lot of thank yous, and yes, we'll have more in-person classes, so we've got those on deck. I'm also going to do some minis scenarios. I think I'll record some of those so you guys have, we did this back in 2019 when they changed that. And I think that was helpful is we just did some different scenarios, recorded them on video. And then that way you could listen to them. And so, still I'm not sounding like a robot rehearsing.
Yeah, so keep
after week.
us, we'll keep you guys posted. We'll have a couple scenario videos that we'll send out that will kind of help you. So if you're drafting an offer this week, next week, and you haven't done it in a while, or you haven't used the new forms, you at least have a reference video to look at. So
Don't forget
we'll
to
send those out.
Yep. Don't forget also when you come in for the training sessions, bring the coats and socks, you guys. We need to gather coats and socks, new coats and socks that we can give to our partners. I think that would be huge. If you could plan on bringing something, that would be great. Awesome. Shannon, thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, everyone.
Candace, Rachel, Deanne, Lisa, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.